Ahoy! New World Season 9 is out today, and with that there are some new features and a lot of balance changes. First off, we have the new Capture the Flag game mode, which will temporarily replace Outpost Rush. Specifically from July 29 to August 8, you will be playing Capture the Flag in order to be able to get quick queues for that, and then after that they will see how things go from there. There's also the new 3v3 arena map, which is Verdant Court, with some adjustments that they will talk about later down in the patch notes, and this will be on an hourly rotation. The free-for-all zone gets quite a few updates, along with the rewards for that as well, so this should be a little bit more useful and more interesting. There's a new mechanic called the Scallywags Curse, which is being near other players for an extended time will give you a stack of the curse, and the longer you are near players, the more the curse grows in strength. While under the effect of the curse you deal less damage and stamina damage, and take more damage and stamina damage as well versus other players. It doesn't affect AI. And to remove the stacks you need to kill players or keep your distance from other players. So this will attempt to somewhat reduce grouping, and then if you die, all stacks get removed. The chest gather times were reduced, and all of them now drop twice as many doubloons. So the large chest is now 15 seconds instead of 25, with 40 to 60 doubloons instead of 20 to 30. You can see the other values here. I wish they would revert the thing about the coconut so that you just get the guaranteed coconut on the first large chest. That doesn't seem to be the case. There's also a mention of doubloon pouches here, granting 2 times doubloons. I tried to look those up on New World database. I'm not exactly sure what the doubloon pouches are because they didn't have any label there. The gear score has also been adjusted for various items. Again, some of the naming here is somewhat confusing at least. Non-Apex crate now range from 720 to 725 instead of max of 710 before. And the grab bag, which again it's not called grab bag in game, for the rare loot now goes from 690 to 700, and the epic loot ranges from 700 to 720. I am assuming that most of these pieces above 700 will likely be upgradable with Umbral next season, because they told us that this season would basically be to prepare for what's coming, and in that way it would make sense that there are these ways to get more gear above 700 gear score now, and probably you want to be as close as possible to 725 because it's going to be cheaper to upgrade with Umbrals. So I'm guessing that is one reason why this is adjusted. We have a bunch of new and updated artifacts. Hammer of Yeet was on the temporary PvP servers first. That is now going to be, or it was Yeetus and Hammer there, but it's going to be a similar version of that. The main effect here is Yeet, which gives you plus 300 push distance and 300% push distance and plus 10% base damage to all Warhammer knockbacks. Clear Out will also ignite the first target hit, turning them into a projectile, causing 100% weapon damage to all targets they pass through along their path. So very fun mechanic that could also have interesting impact for control play. I think maybe in some places we might actually see this being used as a war weapon, because Great Axe is not necessarily ran as an artifact, and the additional damage of passing through enemies could actually be quite useful. Crescent's Wave, a great sword, is also again inspired by a PvP weapon from the seasonal server, and this comes with 2 effects, one of them being Parallax, which is 12% base damage to targets further than 10 meters away, and this one works on both weapons, so this could make this interesting for example, a bow greatsword build, because you would be able to amplify your bow damage to some degree as well, while using this as some form of utility, which I've seen before. It's not super common, but it has been used. And also a Crescent Wave, which is the more important effect for most players, I think, and which also makes sense with the range damage. While above 50% health, heavy attacks cast a projectile dealing 150% weapon damage. However, heavy melee attacks damage is reduced by 50%. Each wave costs 20 mana. I'm not entirely sure how the reduction here will work with the projectile, as in if the projectile damage will still be applied. I'm thinking it is, so if you're hitting someone with the initial heavy attack, I'm thinking you will still hit them with the wave projectile on top of that, so it would still be a lot of extra damage even though it's reduced by 50%. Then there is Plague Herald. This has seen a few adjustments since it's been originally announced. So this is a disease-focused one. Abilities and light attacks inflict a stack of 3% disease with a maximum of 10 stacks, so max 30%. You are also inflicted with 1% disease per stack applied. At 10 stacks on self, so when you have 10% disease on yourself, heavy attacks will consume your stacks and trigger a cloud around the target for 7 seconds that inflicts 30% disease and 10% weaken to all nearby enemies. So somewhat similar to the Hatchet Cloud, I'm assuming. And this has a 12 seconds cooldown, but again, you have to stack it on yourself first anyways. Keep in mind that this is going to be heavy attack based, so you can't use it with Pestilence. You can still use it with Pestilence, I guess, but you can't apply the effect itself with Pestilence. You'd have to use another weapon. But I think this is a very interesting one. I think a very nice new way to apply Plague while obviously sacrificing your armor artifact for it. So there is a trade-off here, but I could see this be very useful in wars especially, but also in small scale if you just like a more disease-focused playstyle and you're not too concerned with healing yourself, because obviously there is the healing reduction to yourself that's getting applied as well. I think there's definitely a trade-off with that self-disease, and yeah, it depends a lot on how easily and how quickly you can stack it. I think this could definitely be a very interesting one. They've also reworked some artifacts to encourage their use. For Vengeance, updated functionality to be similar to the Conqueror's item functionality. Life support outgoing healing is increased by 25% when not affected by any life staff heal over time effects. When basic attacks pass through allies, their stamina mana regen is increased by 30% respectively for 3 seconds. Great, with that said, updated functionality to be quickened casting while above 50% mana, magic weapon ranged heavy attacks charge 25% faster. Not quite sure how much this will be used, or I could possibly imagine this being used with Ice Gauntlet to root easier or something. Maybe Fire Staff, but it is a bit of a weird one. I'm not entirely sure where to place it. Creed updated the functionality to be ambush. Backstabs and headshots against targets will deal 20% increased crit damage and inflict them with 10% weaken for 5 seconds. You also gain 10% power for 5 seconds and increase your crit chance by 10% for 5 seconds. Then they can't be ambushed for 15 seconds. Quite a switch around from the current version, but still focused on an ambush attack on the target. I think the crit damage could be quite interesting, because if you get enough crit damage multipliers, you can kind of go through what used to be resilience, and then maybe the weaken is also interesting. And power, obviously, always nice, but I think there's often better ways to get empower than this. The crit chance actually valuable here, just because the crit damage increase is there. So it depends a lot on the weapon you're using it with it as well. And for Tristan, they updated the functionality to also grant lifesteal against rooted and stunned targets, which I think is a great change. Should have been there from the start, but it's finally there. It's always weird how it was just specifically knocked down, which even there was kind of inconsistent to apply. The Summer Medley Fair returns, but I'm not really going to talk about that. But there's, I think, some new rewards, but really at this point, I think we've seen that too many times. There are some World Boss events again. We have Admiral Black Powder here, August 5 to 11, Empress Dow from September 9 to 15, and Mammoth Mahantaram from October 7 to 13. There's also some boost events. We're going to skip over that, but you can have a look at it. And there will be a season pass, of course, as well as new cosmetics. Throughout the season, at some point, there will be a new Outpost Rush map preview. And that is later in the season, so we'll get more info on that at that point. There are some pretty significant changes to mechanics, specifically Haste. So Haste cap has been reduced from 50 to 40%, and other than that, they have also done a whole pass on most haste in the game, really, even some very surprising ones, and we are going to look into that. That is one of the key changes in this patch. There's a lot happening, and there are also some changes to the Flail, both in how it heals and how it deals damage primarily. So, looking at the haste changes, the first one after the climb change is the Haste Elixir. We're having its haste reduced from 50 to 40%, and the Zephyr Cakes having the haste reduced from 15% to 7%. Had the wrong tooltip before. So this is going to be quite a significant change. I'm not sure if they're still going to be worth it, but that depends a bit on how many other sources of haste you have. For the hard runes, we get multiple haste nerfs. I'm not going to go through all of them in detail here. You can look at them, but this is a very repeating pattern here. It's pretty much every weapon gets touched. On the hatchet in particular, we have the Berserk on the Hunt reduced from 20 to 13%, on quick power reduced from 20 to 15%, and on aggressive approach reduced from 20 to 15%, which I think overall is still a pretty reasonable amount of haste, all things considered, for a weapon that also has other mobility options. Whereas other weapons, just purely based on this, almost feel like they're getting hit a bit harder. Rapier, I think, is also worth noting a lot, since the Allegra haste here is going from 20 to 50 to 12%, and that is something that was kind of used for the haste in escape situations as well. And then the one that I wanted to particularly point out here that I thought was interesting is the Warhammer. It's a 10% reduction on 2 abilities, and I always thought that for the Warhammer having a bit more haste would be fair, just because it doesn't really have any other proper mobility. So a bit surprised that it's such a blanket nerf rather than a bit more targeted towards problematic weapons like the hatchet that just really make use of haste very well. But we'll just see what this blanket change does, and then we'll just go from there. There are also perks that have been adjusted. First of all, Potent Alacrity reworked to be Potent Vivacity. Now increases the potency of energize effects, which are stamina regen effects. Also increased the power from 9% to 12%. I don't think anyone will really want that now. So that was haste potency beforehand. Haste and Vigor from 10 to 7%, Keen Speed from 20 to 15%, and the Sandlion Tarsus Keen Speed, the Sandworm boots specifically, get a slightly stronger nerf from the 20% down to 12%, which is a little bit more than Keen Speed in general, which is down to 15%. These should be craftable now. There's something later in the patch notes that makes it seem like they are craftable with materia now, so you don't have to RNG them anymore, at least. Hardcore Parkour has the haste reduced from 18 to 15%, and yeah, there's a few more here, but I think this is the most noteworthy ones. Maybe Grace Artifact reduced haste from 20 to 15% as well, and Runic Griefs Expeditious Perk reduced haste from 33 to 23. Along with that, just kind of like mentioned here at the end, with the haste changes, Equip Loads removed block stability modifier from heavy and light. That is a very surprising change to me. I didn't expect that. Wonder if that changes something about certain build setups, but not entirely sure yet, because really, if you're running high block stability, you're primarily doing it with tower shields anyways, although there could be something interesting here for PvE speedrunners with the light aspect of that. They also added armor penetration to siege weapons in Wars and OPR. Should be interesting how much more damage that is. And some targeted changes for melee weapons. They will now change color in... The reticle will change color in melee range when pointed at an enemy. And I wonder if this is going to be the same for every weapon, or if it's going to be different depending on which weapon you're using, because the tracking isn't exactly quite the same on the lock-on on every weapon. So this could actually give us some useful information, and we'll find out how it works. And then there's another fix here just for a seasonal token effect. There are some other specific perks that are getting changes. Keen Beacon updated the functionality to increase the crit damage, so crit chance, updated the max values to be 4.5% on armor and 7% on weapons, and reduced the duration from 6 seconds to 4 seconds. Now, I think this is nice for PvE in particular, when you're having guaranteed backstabs already. That's just a damage buff there. In PvP, I don't know if there's going to be enough of a damage increase from this to really get a benefit out of it in most situations with most weapons, but there might be niche cases. They fixed an issue where Transient Rend cooldown could be removed when swapping weapons. That has been in the game for a long time. They fixed an issue with the way that model lifesteal hit on hit lifesteal was triggered, and they adjusted healing breeze to only trigger on the first application of a heal, and then there was a situation where many sticky bomb wouldn't heal. For the bow specifically, they reduced the cooldown of poison shot to 20 seconds from 30 seconds. I feel like this is not the first time the cooldown's getting adjusted. Any bow players may remember that better. I think that was not the original value, the 30 seconds. I think it used to be lower than that at some point, but not 100% sure. And then there was a rapid fire fix here as well, and a hip fire issue. For the fire staff, we're seeing some changes as well. Smolder especially reduced weapon damage from 4.5% to 4.5% from 5% per tick. That sounds small, right? Because it's just 0.5%, but it really adds up because you're stacking Smolder a lot, and then it can quickly become a higher value. Like if you have 5 stacks, it's 2.5% per tick, and obviously with every tick that adds up as well. So this is quite a lot of scaling overall, I think. And yeah, we'll see how much of an impact it has. And then, but there's more change as well. Fire Restoration reduced the cooldown reduction to 7% from 10%. It's a small reduction here, to be honest. But more importantly, Pillar of Fire increased the cooldown to 15 seconds from 10 seconds. That, I think, is quite impactful. That's quite a significant nerf. It's just, well, yeah, 1.5 times as long cooldown. Which I guess kind of is factored in, or like what factors into that is target lock, and making Pillar of Fire easier to hit and making it more effective. So maybe this is to counteract that a little bit. And then there's some fixes for a fast fire again, or rapid fire again. The Flail gets these new buffs. So on one hand, you have the buff to its outgoing healing, which is increased by 15% if the Flail user doesn't have a life staff equipped. So this also gets increased further, added a buff to its outgoing healing by 15% if the Flail user is not in heavy equip load. And in combination, that's quite interesting because Void Blade builds are usually running medium, and you can run a Void Gauntlet or Void Blade build with a Flail, and you get the extra 30% healing on the Flail along with that, and I think that could make for a very interesting, well, somewhat of a paladin option. And then there's also a base damage increase of 15% if the Flail user doesn't have a shield equipped. Problem with that is, while that's great, we have the shields in the game already, the round shields that give us a base damage increase. I am looking up what the exact value is right now because I don't remember from the top of my head, but as there's already an increase, it's 4.3%, I think. I'm not sure if that's the 725 value. Or 5% at 725. So you are basically just getting 10% extra damage compared to running a round shield, but you're losing the other damage perks that you'd be getting with a round shield. The upside is that you can run a different loadout. You don't have to make a shield focused loadout. So yeah, pros and cons here. Not entirely sure how I feel about this, or if this is going to be enough, because the Flail damage really is not that high by itself. And I don't know if this is enough to actually make a significant difference to that, but I will definitely try around with this. I think this is interesting. I used to initially run the Flail without a shield just because I didn't want to change my equip load up to the next heavier level. So yeah, it was an interesting time. Kind of going back to that could be fun. For Deflective Frailty, the lifesteal power has been increased from 10 to 15%. Supportive Blessing reduced the self-healing portion from 50% of base damage to 35% of base damage. And there's a fix for failure to launch. Supportive Blessing, by the way, is the chain heal from Arcane Eruption that has a very short range though. So I don't know how much impact that will have in terms of how many people are even using that at this point, to be honest. Great Axe just gets a quick change to Graph sometimes not reaching the max slow value when combined with other slows. For the Hatchet specifically, aside of the Haste nerfs, obviously being somewhat impactful there, the duration of Berserk has been reduced to 5 seconds, and now hitting a target will extend the duration by 1 second up to a maximum of 12 seconds. I think this is a much better approach because I think Hatchet as an escape tool is still too potent. Even after that, it will still be somewhat decent, at least because of just cleansing everything on you and giving you that grit and giving you that mobility. So yeah, I think it'll still be at least somewhat useful, but obviously playing aggressive with it will now be rewarded. For the Ice Gauntlet, we have a few tooltip clarifications and whatnot, but Refreshing Frost cooldown reduction has been reduced to 15% from 20%, which is, I think, quite important since there were some ways to reduce the cooldown on abilities very, very heavily with a full cooldown focused setup. And I think taking away 5% of that makes that rotation a little bit slower, which I think is needed. It also increased the knockback of wind chill. This I want to see in game. This could be interesting because it always felt kind of weird. The knockback on wind chill feels weird, but it's also because you have to hold the camera at a relatively weird angle where you can't really see how people are being knocked back most of the time unless you like turn the camera up. So yeah, I'm curious how this one will go and if this will actually be impactful. The life staff gets some minor fixes here, and again a rapid fire fix. Same for the musket, some fixes here, and then also the shooter stance ability is no longer able to target lock, which is quite interesting. That obviously could be quite impactful for any console players, any controller players that are using shooter stance. For the rapier, there was an issue with Deadly Flourish granting stamina that's been fixed, but Flourish and Finish gets a PvE fix where it should now be able to hit certain types of mobs easier, like lions, wolves, boars, everything that's on the ground, basically gorillas as well. And the pushback against AI, not against players, there's no pushback against players like this, has been reduced to 1.5 meters down from 3 meters. There's a very small note here for the Sword and Shield, but it's a very important one. Leaping Strike moved stagger. I think this might be one of the biggest changes in the patch notes, to be honest, because it really changes comboing with the Sword and Shield, and yeah, it just has this one little note. I think this is going to be leading to some very interesting changes in SnS playstyles, potentially. It wasn't necessarily... Well, it depends on your playstyle, really, but I think there will still be aggressive builds running Shield Rush, Shield Bash for sure, depending on playstyle and goals. It'll still include Leaping Strike, of course, as well, because it is high mobility for setup, but it is significantly going to reduce the disruption caused by SnS and the self-setup that it has. And we'll see if the slow can be enough. If just the melee slow that you apply as well can suffice in order to keep it impactful. But SnS has been very strong for a very long time and has been performing really well, and I think it will not disappear because of this change because really, even after this, most other melee weapons are a fair bit slower when it comes to engaging and locking down a target. So I think it'll probably still have its place somewhere at least. But yeah, interesting change. The Void Gauntlet also gets some important changes. Update Leeching Blade to escape with focus only. but more importantly, Void Blade reduced weapon damage to 95% from 100% for light attacks and 145 instead of 150% for heavy attacks. This is a back and forth that has been nerfed down before and has been upped again before. And when it was nerfed down, Void Blade very quickly fell completely out of favor when, you know, initially it was the best PvE DPS weapon. So it's gone through some stages. I think this will have an impact, but I think with the current tracking, this alone will not ruin Void Blade. I think the damage value will still be sufficient, especially since it also still has self-sustain, even though self-sustain is also getting nerfed. But yeah, I think this is going to be one of those things where it's a wait-and-see effect as well, how much impact we're getting from these 5%. They added a cooldown to Invigorated Rupture. They fixed an issue where Oblivion would cause damage to the caster. And then they fixed an issue here with Void Blade disappearing when blocking. That's been a weird one. So, just a couple more fixes. But the main one is the 5% per hit reduction. For the Warhammer, they adjusted the window in which the rotation is possible for the Wrecking Ball and Armor Penetration abilities to make them feel a little bit smoother. So it sounds like you can... This is an intentional combo to set up now. It could be nice. Hard Rune reduced the duration to... Stoneform, sorry. Reduced the duration to 4 seconds. And they fixed an issue with the Devourer Hard Rune that allowed rapid fire with some weapons. Mount speeds in settlements have been increased. Very nice. You can now use your mount to get around town faster. That was always a bit annoying that the mount just was slow in town as well. I think this is just a nice quality of life change. I fixed an issue with Desert Sunrise where it could increase the duration of reduction on, or the duration reduction on dots by more than intended. They fixed an issue where the burst regen potion was granting mana regen. Fixed an issue that allowed players to jump higher after using certain abilities. And fixed an issue where players would drown when they disconnect or locked out while swimming. And then there is a bunch of bugs and tuning notes. The first one here are specifically for Capture the Flag. The flag carrier debuff now starts weak and stacks up to full power over time. I felt like it was actually okay the way it was. I don't think it needs that, but oh well. Whirlwind, Social Distancing, and Tomb B now cause the player to drop the flag when activated. Completely fair. I was surprised that Whirlwind wasn't included when I used that, and I was just able to continue with it. They also added a pity rule to capture the flag. If a team is ahead by 2 or more points 5 minutes into the match, they'll automatically win on the next flag capture. Fair enough. Just keep things speedy and don't have people stuck in bad games. In Outpost Rush, they removed the southwest and southeast ramps to the Star and Moon outpost. Bridges will now give an advantage to navigating the southern outpost directly from the forts. This is interesting to me. I want to see, like, it should mean that you just have to go down into the middle initially to get to the south areas, if I understand correctly. And then you have to build up the bridges. So that would change things quite a fair bit. They updated the bulwark to be able to be placed in more areas of the Outpost Rush map. They fixed the death screen bug. No more some bearded guy kills. They made some performance improvements primarily to address issues in the Coral Divide, which I think were necessary. Fixed an issue where an ore node was spawning in a tree in Coral Divide. And then there's a couple more fixes here that I think I will not go into in detail. They also fixed in Barebone specifically there was some issue that some weapon abilities would have jam damage conversion, and also they allow encumbrance perks now in Barebones, which is good because people kept going in there and then being over encumbered because the encumbrance perks were suddenly disabled. And the fact that they're doing these changes for Barebones OPR makes me think that we're going to see a return of that at some point as well, which is nice. And there is one change that has been done to the new arena map. Ring of Fire now starts 30 seconds into a round on Verdant Court based on the feedback from the preview. There are various other changes here that I will just quickly show you because there isn't really anything worth saying about them. They're just a bunch of fixes, starting with world experience here. Likewise, we have a lot of expedition fixes here, some expedition AI fixes, some world AI fixes, But there are also some economy changes here, and I think those are worth talking about. They added Sandworm material recipes for the Trial of the Devourer named armor pieces, which means you can now craft both the keenly empowered pants and the keen speed boots, as far as I understand it. To address low accessibility, the perk items added for the new perks from Season 8 have also been added as rewards from mutations and influence race caches. Selection of other perk items has been added there as well. Question is what the drop rates on those are. Weapon schematics for Gorgonite items are now available from the Hive of the Gorgons raid. The drop rate for all Gorgonite schematics has been improved. So I think this should be the full pool of Gorgonite items or schematics dropping now. They added the Vampire Vestment to Mutation Artifact reward buckets, and the Lich Gloves have been added to the PvP reward track. There are a bunch of UI fixes here, some season fixes, and then some seasonal items here. One thing that's interesting is there's new Faction Fest skins that have been permanently added to the Faction store. The Valkyrie Reckoning for Marauders, Valkyrie Vengeance for Syndicate, Valkyrie Glory for Covenant. I definitely want to check those out. I wish they would do a larger overhaul of the Faction store though, but I'm thinking that it's probably coming with the next season. And then there's a last batch of general changes here. If you enjoyed this update, then consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you're not notified of future New World related videos. And other than that, I'd like to thank my patrons for supporting this video. Of course, thank you for watching. SLOTH out.